So how long have I known you for? Now?
Oh, gosh.
If I can't even remember, you've presented.
I think it's been a long time, Michelle. Probably 15 years, maybe.
Maybe?
I think so.
Oh my
I do
gosh.
think so.
We've gone way back.
We've gone way back, and what a joy it's been.
Yeah. So I feel really grateful to have Josephine back tonight. When she presents, the one thing I always feel is so much love and compassion coming from her. She just shares her stories and teachings with us. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about tonight and how to develop, one's intuition, and also to hear some of her own stories of how this came about in her. I don't know if that was part of the presentation tonight, but I did hear it, I think, once before, but it was always incredible to me. So I hope that she has a chance to do share that again. So without further ado, here's Josephine.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm so glad to have you all here. It's really an honor to be here and speaking with you tonight. And of course, this is my favorite topic, talking about our intuition and our psychic ability. And so tonight's talk is called The ABCs of, developing intuition. Learn how to listen to and trust your instincts. And what I thought I'd do tonight is a series of exercises with little bits of information around them. Because I think it's nice to just, jump right in and start swimming a little bit. And I noticed on the website for Spirit Winds here that they have a slogan which is called Enhancing Your Health. And that's what we're about here tonight. So this is going to be using our intuition for enhancing our health, because that's what we'd like to do, is see ourselves in better health. That's why we're here. And I always like to start my work with a spiritual agreement. And this was a gift to us from our spiritual mentor, Jana Massey. And several of you here remember Jana. And it goes like this. Together we acknowledge that everything that we think, that we say, and that we do at this time will be of the highest good. And together we ask for truth, the understanding of that truth, and the wisdom to use it in our lives. Can you all agree? Yes. Thank you. So that's a really nice way to start out any experience that involves psychic ability. We've all just agreed to be in touch with our higher self and for truth and for wisdom. It's a great way to set the tone for the energy, isn't it? So recently a friend of mine came over and we were talking about a women's circle that we were going to do. And she was taken with the idea of elders of excellence. And I thought, wow, what a great term, elders of excellence. Don't we love that? Isn't that beautiful? And so I was kind of captivated by that term. And I thought, I like that idea. I'd like to try to create that. And when I was a young girl, I happened to know an elder of excellence. She was about 75 when she came to help take care of myself and my two brothers when my parents would go out of town. And she was the mother of my dad's friend. And her name was Kama. And she was Danish. And she would cook for us, she would take care of us, clean us, put us to bed and all that. And the only thing she ever ate was organic apples and organic fresh walnuts in the shell. And I found out her story some years later. I always wondered, because she'd make us pancakes and chicken and dumplings and whatever else we were eating. But she would sit down at the table, we'd all be served, and she'd sit down with her apples, she'd cut it up in her walnuts. I thought, that is really weird as a kid, How can you do that? She'd make us cookies. She might have one bite every once in a while of one or two things, but that was all she ate. Well, it turned out that Kama, when she was about 45, came down with really bad rheumatoid arthritis, so much so that she was crippled and in a wheelchair. And back then, this was in the 50s and 60s, there were no handicap laws, right? And she happened to have a second-story apartment. So her son, who was in his 30s or 20s or something, would have to come, go up the stairs, get his mom out of her wheelchair, put her in a chair, get the wheelchair, carry it down, put it in the car, go back up, get his mother, pick her up, carry her down the stairs, put her in the car, go to wherever she had to go, doctor, whatever, get out the wheelchair, get out the mom, the whole deal, right? And she, as a mother, that's the last thing she wanted for her son, right? To be burdened by this huge burden. And she was so troubled by it, and yet she was a young woman and looked like she was going to live a long life, had a lot of longevity in her family, and here she was totally crippled. So she, one day in desperation, just said, whatever, if there is a God, I don't know, but I need some answers, and I need them now, and I need to know what to do. And she just sat with that question until she saw apples and walnuts. And she knew that was her food. And so that's what she started eating. She let go of everything else. And her son, what would you like, Mom, from the grocery store? Organic apples and organic walnuts. Back then they didn't even have to call them organic. It was just off the farm because pesticides were just barely in use at that time. So that's what she did, and guess what happened to her? All of her rheumatoid arthritis went away. Now, I'm not saying that this is the cure for rheumatoid arthritis. I'm just saying this is what worked for Kama. This was what her higher self communicated to her. And when she was in her 70s and taking care of us, she was the most agile person I've ever known. We see people who are very agile these days, yoga masters and whatnot. Well, Kama, I once saw Kama step off of a porch, not a stair, not 2 stairs tall porch. Have you ever stepped off of a step and you don't know it's there? You know how jolting it is to your whole body? Well, she stepped off that porch. Boom! She just went down gracefully to her knees, came right back up, moved on down the line as if nothing had happened to her. She was incredible. And she lived to be 100 and healthy. Okay? Pretty amazing, right? So from that big, horrible story to this complete turnaround. So that's the A. ABCs. Ask your higher self. So we've set ourselves up with our spiritual agreement to be right in that place where we can ask our higher selves. And so what I'd like to do right now is to start off with a little exercise. And I like to call this, what would I do right now if I really loved myself? So if you want to just get comfortable and maybe close your eyes and just relax your mind a little bit. And then just ask yourself, what would I do right now if I really loved myself?
If I really wanted to what?
If I really loved myself.
Oh.
Yeah, if I really loved myself, what would I do right now? And just let yourself receive. We'll give you a few moments here. Allow yourself to remember what you get. If you have something, go ahead and open your eyes. If not, we'll give you a few more minutes and make a mental note or jot it down on your papers. If I really loved myself, what would I do right now? And if you don't have an answer yet, just go ahead and give yourself some time later tonight or tomorrow to ask yourself this question again. In fact, this is a great question to ask yourself anytime. And so often we forget to ask. And really, if we want to ask our higher self, all we need to do is just think of that part of us that is centered in love. And then, what would I do if I really loved myself? It's a wonderful way to get good answers right now. So Louise Hay, one of my favorite teachers, Michelle talked about my story a little bit. I'm not going to go into it tonight, but I have other YouTubes on my YouTube channel about, other talks here at Spirit Winds that you can see that I go into that story. But she was one of my great teachers. Twice I've had to spend a year in bed. That's a lot, you know. It's like, oh, okay. So we all have our areas where we learn. Some of us learn in finances, some in relationships, some in injuries or illness. Well, I kind of picked the injury path, and so I've done that a few times. But this book is a wonderful way to love ourselves. And then also this book, Empowering Women, Whoopsie, by Louise. Again, Every Woman's Guide to Successful Living. And it's also great for men, but it's a wonderful book. She wrote it for women because she wrote this book in the 90s, and she really wanted women to be able to stand up and empower ourselves. And one of the things that she says in here, which I loved, was that we have a model for older age in our society that is not very pretty, right? It's okay, assisted living, and then in case you need a little more, we've got nurses on site, and then in case you need a little more, we've got, surgeries just around the corner. And it's kind of scary, right? Because one of those things leads to another. You get involved in that disease management situation, and before you know it, you're down a really kind of a difficult road that's hard to come back from. So she said, why don't we envision communities where elders are with children and helping and doing stuff and active? And yeah, I like that idea. So again, the Elders of Excellence, let's start to rethink this a little bit. And so I got to thinking about that, and I thought, wouldn't it be nice to do a little exercise where we ask our 95-year-old self, or if you're in your 80s, maybe your 105-year-old self. Imagine that part of you, that self, being 20 or 30 years older and really healthy, like Kama, right? And then imagine her or him, and then say to that person in a meditation, how do I get from here to there? What path do I take to make it to that beautiful part of myself that's a healthy elder that can contribute to society in a beautiful way? And so that's my next little exercise. But before we go into that, I have a handout that you've got right here that I'd like you to take a look at. It's called Health Promoting Sites and Links. It looks like this. And so one of these, over here on the side, mine's kind of written on, is one called Escape Fire. And these are basically videos that I have found very inspirational, and I'd love for you to go ahead and check these movies and videos and talks out. And this one, Escape Fire, is about the military cutting costs in healthcare, because the military has to pay, they have a budget, right? They have to pay a lot of money, and if it's expensive to keep people in disease, right? So it's better to have them get healthy and cured. So they try to get people healthy. So they found things like massage, physical therapy, yoga, meditation helps these vets and other people to get off of their medications. And it's a great movie, and it talks a lot about the damage, how dysfunctional our healthcare system is, because it's really not about healthcare, it's about disease management. We call it healthcare, but it's really, unfortunately, because of the way the profit base is, if we are sick and needing care, we make more money for the, quote, healthcare industry, right? If we are healthy, we don't make them very much money. So they have a vested interest in keeping us on the disease management track. Now that's different in England, where they have socialized medicine. So in England, because the government is paying for your health or illness, they have laws about how much sugar can be added to food. Laws. You cannot add sugar to foods that don't need sugar added, right? Here, what did we grow up on? Fruit Loops, Captain Crunch, Cookie Crisp, I mean, this was breakfast. You roll out of bed, you have a bowl of cookies. It's like, come on, how ridiculous is that? So we got to take a look at some of these things, and then we all know sugar's very addictive, right? You feed it to rats and mice, and not that I would promote those kind of experiments using animal testing, but still it's significant to note that the mice will choose sugar over cocaine. Yikes. Yeah, yikes. So pretty scary. So So we have to take a look at what we're doing with our food and with our diet and how we're taking care of ourselves. And all of these links and movies do that. So we've got Uprooting the Leading Causes of Death by Dr. Michael Greger. Amazing. What the Health? That's an incredible film. Healing Cancer from the Inside Out. Okay, Simply Raw, Reversing Diabetes in 30 Days. Those are great little places to look. So now, the vested interest, those who are invested in you being sick, to keep you sick, right, the healthcare industry, they like to create conflicting ideas because, as the tobacco industry said, and I thought this was quite astounding, but they have, documentation to show that the tobacco industry early on, when it was trying to convince people that smoking relaxes you, it's good for your health, pregnant women should smoke a cigarette, they get relaxed. Well, they actually said in their memos, doubt is our product. They want to create doubt. So then we're like, oh, I don't know what kind of diet should I do? Paleo? Should I do vegan? I don't know. There's so much misinformation. Right? A lot of information going around as true information. Well, these films have pretty well documented what's really going to keep you healthy. And, if you're a pretty healthy person, you can get away with a lot. But if you're into illness or disease, then you got to really turn up the flame and make some changes, right, towards good health. So I just bring this up because our voices that we hear inside of us can be very conflicting. So we want to know what we're talking about. So now I'd like to do that exercise. And so this is the one of asking your 95-year-old self, how do I get there from here? So just go ahead again and close your eyes and relax and imagine your elder self. Let her or him be beautiful and vital and alive and full of energy. And then just ask that part of you, how do I get there from here? How do I get there from here? We'll give you a moment to let yourself receive. And when you feel like you have a little answer, go ahead and open your eyes and maybe jot down a note or two, or allow yourself to remember. And if you still feel like you need a little more time, just realize that you can do this in your own time and take as long as you need. I like to recommend that people go out into nature. If they're having a little bit of hard time receiving, just remember that you want to connect with your higher self. That's who you're going to ask, your higher self. And then you can go ahead and be ABCs, believe what you receive. Right? Because doubt is the great destroyer of psychic ability. If we doubt ourselves and we want to double check constantly, oh, I'm not so sure, I better check my references. How can I be the proper authority in my life? I can't believe what I hear. Then that's going to stop the flow, right? So when we're in the flow and we're sitting in our higher self and we're asking, we're going to get exactly the right information. We're going to know just what to do. And then we want to trust it. We want to believe it. We want to trust it. And then take action on it. That's our C. We'll get to that in just a moment. So now, this brings us to that question with psychic ability. Well, which voice, Josephine? I've got so many voices in my head. They're all the time going, oh my gosh. And there was a movie by Woody Allen that I just loved, Annie Hall. I don't know if you recall. But there's this scene where he and Annie Hall are in bed for like the first time, and they're sitting next to each other, and they're talking. They're wondering if this was the right thing, and what are their friends going to think? Oh my gosh. And they're kind of back and forth. And the camera pans out a little bit, and you see that on his side is his mother in bed with them. And then on her side is her father in bed with her. And then on the other side of his mother is his dad. And then from our society, from our churches, and from authorities in our lives, and from our parents, and from school teachers, and we hear all these shoulds, and you should, and da 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 da, right? You know, that dictatorial voice of authority. Well, that is not very often the voice that we want to listen to. You've probably heard, don't should on yourself. The same thing. So that's probably not your higher self voice, right? So, and then we also have our habit mind, right? I've always done it that way. This is the way I do it, right? And our habit mind, I went into an extensive talk on that here at Spirit Winds in 2015. And if you go back to this page here, you'll see the link for my YouTube channel and some of my blogs and things. And you can just Google and you'll find it there. And the title of that talk was How the Subconscious Affects Our Health, Uniting with Our Subconscious Minds. And that's a lot about that habit mind and moving with that. So I'll let that talk take care of it, because that's a big subject. But there's another little set of voices, which is the voice of addiction, right? Ooh, now we're talking about that second piece of cake that Michelle was mentioning at the beginning. Or that second piece of pizza, or that second piece of chocolate, or that second chocolate bar. So, you know, it can get pretty bad. Sometimes our addictions can really grab a hold of us. So when I'm doing a medical intuitive reading for people, one of the things that I usually ask when I first get going is just to kind of get a reading of who I'm speaking with on the telephone is chocolate, sugar, coffee, alcohol, cigarettes, right? White flour, white sugar, what are we doing? You know, so I can kind of see, okay, so if it's sugar 3 times a day, that's not going to be a very strong health, right? Just because we know sugar is so damaging to the immune system. And it burns the body up, you know, up, down, up, down. Or coffee. Are we looking at exhausted adrenals here? Or cigarette smoke. Ooh, then we're now just, you know, the tobacco leaf will take up radioactive particles from the soil, deposit it in the leaf, and then we inhale that into our lungs. The radioactivity is not killed by the heat, and it's deposited inside of the lung tissue. Well, any constant irritation over time can cause cancers, right? So if you're depositing radioactivity into your lung tissue all the time, so if somebody's a smoker, well, is it a cigarette a week, or is it a half a pack a day, or what is it? So these are our addictions, and those voices are very strong. And they come out of the habit mind and also out of the addictive part of our brains. So there is actually an area of the brain that lights up whenever we're in our addiction. Guess what else lights up when we eat it? Cheese. Ah! Cheese, right there on the addiction part of the brain. So there's our second piece of pizza. Plus the white flour, right? That's also an addictive food. Refined, processed foods, you know. So we want to be looking, what we're doing here, we're at Spirit Winds, after all, we're trying to enhance our health. So we're looking at intuition in terms of health and bringing that health up a little bit. So those are good questions to ask, enhancing our health. So if we've got stuff like that going on, we want to commit to change. Oh no, change! But it is the only constant in the universe, change. So there's our ABCs for how to listen to and trust your instincts, developing your intuition. So one of my really favorite teachers is the great Dr. Schultz. Now, he studied with all of the really good herbologists of yesteryear, and so he talks about, you know, creating powerful health with liver cleansing, kidney cleansing, bowel detoxification, and he even has this wonderful book called There Are No Incurable Diseases. And we're talking about a botanical approach here. There's the two schools of thought in medicine. There's the school of thought that got promoted heavily in the 30s and 40s and 50s through the universities. I believe it was the Rockefellers donated a lot of money to those universities to get people on in their board of directors that were more in the pharmaceutical vein of things, the surgery, drugs and surgery. Poison it, cut it out. That's one school of thought. The other school of thought is build the body's health and the body will take care of the problem. So we got the two schools of thought. Poison it, cut it out, mask the symptoms, build the body, and let the body take care of it itself. So the natural healers are in that build the body, let the body take care of itself. And he's certainly a natural healer, and he learned from some of the greats in yesteryear, Dr. Christopher Bernard Jensen. So he's got a lot of wonderful tips, and I do his cleanses on a regular basis. I like to get in there and go in deep, because I really like to have good, vital, vigorous health. And I like to feel like I'm 20 years old. So I do a lot of cleanses to keep myself healthy, and I keep an eye on my addictions. So I try not to do too many of those. So, and one of the things that Dr. Schultz said is, if you keep on doing what you've always done, you're going to keep on getting what you've always got. Right? Yeah, that's it. So, if we don't want to wake up with the same problems every day, we got to make some changes. That's the seed. Commit to change. So now, I also gave you guys a little healthcare, you gals, gals and guys, a little healthcare checklist. Now, this is for minor imbalances, right? This is, some yoga postures, some morning prayers, listening meditations, conscious breaths, loving thoughts and actions, touching the earth, speaking with friends, getting some healing support like chiropractic or acupuncture or massage or self-massage, quiet time, 8 hours of sleep. This is nice for just maintaining good health. But if you are in a situation where you need to do some real strong healing, then you're going to have to really turn it up. So this self-care checklist is just for, minor problems or, just maintaining good health. But if you want to really turn a bad situation around, you've got to turn up the heat. And one of the things that Dr. Schultz says with people who don't make it out of the disease process, in other words, they go farther and farther into it, is that they did too little, too late. So we want to really, he says, purple candles aren't going to do it as much as we'd like. Although, if we reach enlightenment, they probably would. But I'm working on it. I'm not there yet, right? I don't know anybody who really is, other than a couple of these wonderful people here. So, I'll talk about those in just a moment. So, which voice? Our societal programming or our addictions? Both of those have a very characteristic quality, which is that they're not very neutral, right? They're kind of strongly opinionated. Societal promptings and addictions, those have some strong opinions that come with them. They're kind of insistent. Versus the voice of our higher self. Now that one is always neutral and compassionate. So when I asked my 95-year-old self, gee, how do I get to where you are from here? She looked at me and smiled and she said, oh, I remember the age of 62. That was the year I finally gave up my food addictions. Wow. Neutral, compassionate, full of love. And guess what I've done since my birthday? Gave them up. I gave up my food addictions, one of which was chocolate. And, chocolate is one of those things that's so darn good. But there's this really wonderful product that just happened to come onto the shelf this year. It's called Addictive Wellness Raw Chocolates. Guess what their slogan is inside? May all of your addictions be beneficial. And they have no sugar. And they are rich with healing natural herbs in the back. Now, it's not going to taste like, Mama Ganache downtown. It's just fabulous tasting chocolate, right? But it's good enough to get me over the hump. So I have managed to give up my chocolate addiction with this Addictive Wellness Raw Chocolate. I'll pass the little box around because it's so good. And, 1 or 2 of those a week, and I'm like, chocolate has just left my awareness. And I kind of hit them hard for the first month, right? Now I'm like,
Where do you get this?
Lassen's, Whole Foods, Foods for, any of your healthy food stores, the Natural Foods Co-op, all these wonderful healthy food stores are going to carry this. And online, of course, they've also got a lovely website. So there we go. Isn't that nice? Thank God there's some step-down approaches, to kind of coming off of some of these things that are so addictive. So the voice of our higher self, what is it? It's always neutral and compassionate. Right? And I loved what Iyanla Van Zandt said. She's a wonderful spiritual teacher. And she said, the sheep know the voice of the shepherd. Isn't that beautiful? And we do. We know, right? We know. It's just like, oh, yes, that was the year I gave up all my food addictions. It's like, whoa, okay, I get it. I get it. The sheep know the voice of the shepherd. So now, here's a little exercise, and there's no fear, right? There's no fear. There's just love in that, right? It's not a should. It's not a societal programming. It's not, a couple of parental inputs, or it's not addictive. It's just, yeah, you get it. It's loving. There's no fear. So now there's another little exercise that I'd love us to do. Because so often in our culture we talk about, oh, my bad knee. Or, oh, darn, this shoulder is always a bad shoulder. Or, oh, these wrinkles. You know, what am I going to do about these wrinkles? My bad eye, right? No. These are beloved parts of the divine, right? We're all a slice of the divine, right? We're all a drop of water in the ocean of divinity, right? So here's our little exercise. Let's just take a moment and just take our hands, which are extensions of our heart, and put them on whatever part of our body that we have been so critical of, whatever it may be, and just put the love in. Just put the love in. Just let the love go in. These are parts of our beautiful divine self. And this is a wonderful exercise to do every day. So that knee, that liver, those kidneys, the neck, the shoulders, whatever it is. So let yourself feel the love. Just come into you from your hands, from your heart, the expressions of your heart, right into your body, wherever it needs the love. And that's the exercise. And I hope that you'll remember this exercise and do it regularly. Like if you're laying in bed at night, you're trying to fall asleep, just let your hands go to where the body would like a little loving. And then remember to refer to your knee that's been injured as my knee that's healing. My knee that's healing. It's not a bad knee. It's a perfectly good one. It's trying its best in all of its wisdom to bring you back into balance. So now, like I said, enlightenment pretty much transforms everything. And there are a few people who I know of who have reached that. And one of them is a wonderful woman on the lecture tour, Anita Morjani. And she wrote this book called Dying to Be Me. And she died from 4th stage lymphoma. She had tumors the size of lemons all over her body, like 30 or 40 of them. All of her organs had shut down. She was in a coma. Her liver was no longer functioning, her kidneys, her lungs, everything was shut down. And then, on the other side, she met with her father, who had predeceased her, and he said, you know, there's more work for you to do if you want to. You could come back. And it was so tempting for her to keep on going into the other side, but she went ahead and came back. And the messages that she brought back are very profound, and they are in this book, and they are just beautiful, and I recommend it to everybody. Because, you know, when you get to that point, if you have a chocolate ice cream cone, it's not going to hurt you. It's going to be just fine. Right? And she's not going to go overboard with it either, but there's going to be that moment where the sun is setting and she's in love with the world and she's going to just sit right down and enjoy that. You know, I've heard it said once that a bowl of ice cream eaten with guilt is really toxic, but a bowl of ice cream eaten with love and gusto is pretty darn good for you, right? So while you're making your switch off of your addictions, then just keep that in mind. We just want to keep the love flowing because the love really gets us there. And then Peace Pilgrim. Oh my gosh, if you haven't heard of her, so this is her book, Her Life and Her Work in Her Own Words. She walked 28,000 miles on foot for peace. Her walk was a prayer. She walked across the United States 8 times. She's just an amazing woman. She died in 1984. She did lecture here at Cal Poly. She spoke in churches and colleges and universities across the nation. And basically what she said is, do you eat sensibly? Do you get plenty of fresh air and sunshine and lots of exercise? That's kind of your basic nutshell key, right? Are you out having fun? And then another book that I meant to bring is called Healthy at 100 by John Robbins. Talks about all of these cultures around the world where the elders are completely healthy, right? What do? Well, after breakfast, they go run the goats up the mountain to graze, and then after they come back down for lunch, and then they have a little siesta, and after the siesta, they go back up the mountain with the goats again, and then they come back down, right? And they eat only fresh foods from the garden. Nothing is processed. It's just like, what are we going to eat right now? And what they don't eat, they give to the pigs or the guinea pigs or the gophers or the chickens, right? No leftovers. Leftovers sitting, collecting molds and mildews and wool, So it's fresh food. It's right from what they've grown. And that's what they eat. And what is it? Mostly vegetables and fruits. Some of the cultures, teeny bit of, small fish, or maybe a guinea pig or a goat every 6 months. But really, that's about it. They're not really big on the animal products. So that's another thought there. Yeah, so... And then, so Peace Pilgrim, I've got her books here. If you want to make a donation, please feel free and take a book. Oh, thank you. And then I also have my little book here, Positive Possibilities, Health and Healing Tips from a Medical Intuitive. It's a series of chapters on just interesting things like a symptom-free menopause, which I have the great blessing to have done, or the miracle of osteoporosis. We don't realize how osteoporosis is such a great gift to us. It is helping us to balance our acid blood. If we're drinking too much coffee, eating too much meat, and having too much sugar, our blood gets too acidic. And if acid blood goes to the brain, we got some troubles, or to the heart. That's really not very good. So what does our body do in its wisdom? It mines the bones of wonderful calcium, which neutralizes the acid. It's a buffering agent to drop the acidity of the blood down, so that the blood is no longer acid when it goes to the brain and the heart. So it's a wisdom of our body, the miracle of osteoporosis, keeping us alive and healthy despite our bad habits and our addictions, right? So there's a lot of good information in this book, and feel free to go ahead and pick one up if you want. I've got their little price tag right here. And then also, too, our wildlife care brochures are here, so help yourself to those. And so with Peace Pilgrim, her life was a prayer. She walked, every step was a prayer, and she was communing with divinity. And there's, with every breath that she took, and there's no reason that we can't do that either. All we have to do is just remember to ask our higher self to just stay present with that. This is really the true nutshell of our psychic ability, of our intuition. Just remembering to kind of constantly ask. And one of the ways that we can do that is that first exercise. What would I do if I really loved myself right now? I would cut myself free to go outside and have a good time, play with the dog, It would be something like that. And then believing what you receive. And then committing to change if you need to make changes that your higher self has directed you toward. So that's our ABCs of intuition. And I'd like to finish by going ahead and sharing with you a lovely little exercise that was, again, a gift from my teacher and mentor, Jana Massey. And this one is called the Pink Fountain. And so if you'd like to just get comfortable for just a moment. And Einar is recording this talk, so it will be available on my YouTube channel, which you have on this link here and on my blog. So if you haven't had a chance to jot down any notes, don't worry, they'll be there available for you. You can just listen again and zoom ahead to whichever parts you missed. And so here's this little exercise, and this one is to awaken our heart energy and our healing energy. So go ahead and just relax and get comfortable, and maybe close your eyes if you like. And breathe to your heart. Just allow your breath to travel right to your heart. And now, if you have anything in your hand, just set it down and let your palms come together. In that little position, palms together. And now very gently press your palms together. This sort of activates our heart energy. And then breathe to the heart again. And now relax the palms. Relax the arms. And in your mind's eye, imagine a fountain, a beautiful fountain. And let the water color change to pink. And now let yourself stand in the water. Feel that beautiful pink water washing over you. Let it flow over you. And now affirm from your divinity, whatever healing needs to take place, I now allow it. Whatever healing needs to take place, I now allow it. Now in your mind's eye, step out of the fountain. Allow the fountain to dissolve. And the exercise is complete. And go ahead and return to your normal waking consciousness. Move your body a little bit. Let your eyes open. Come back to your full self here. So thank you very much for listening. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thanks so much for coming. Yeah, please, Fran.
I have a question about meditation and hearing the intuition. And
Yes.
I'm wondering that besides being quiet and still to hear the intuition, can you also just hear it on the fly? And does meditation help support better intuition?
Absolutely it does. So one of the wonderful things about meditation is it helps us to get more in touch with which part of us is the left brain and which part of us is the right brain, right? The left brain is the part of us that's thinking about the past, it's making the grocery list, it's got all those little things it wants us to do, it's the monkey mind that's in meditation, right? The right brain is when we enter into that more spaciousness, that what people talk about as mindfulness, being in the present moment, mindful of now. And so we can train our brains in meditation to be more into that mindful mind. So one of the ways that I like to do that, to come to the present moment, is to use my senses, my natural senses. And these help me to step into my extrasensory perception. So like, for instance, in meditation, I might just look at something that's right in front of me, using my vision, and then I'll notice what is just right above that. And then maybe I'll notice what's just right to the right or the left of that. And you can try this as I'm mentioning these. And then as well, we might think of our sense of touch. And so I'm going to notice right now where my feet are touching the floor, and you can too. I'm also noticing where my garments are touching my body. You can notice that also. Or hearing, a sense of hearing. So I'm noticing right now that I can hear the fountain burbling in the background. It's a kind of a close sound. And I can also notice sounds that are a little ways away, conversation happening in the parking lot. So that's just 3 of our senses, but you may have noticed that during this time there wasn't any monkey mind, right? Mm-hmm. That left brain had to take a little vacation because we just took a nice long little jaunt into the right brain. That's our mindfulness. So now our mindfulness, our right brain, that's where we are in touch. We've become one with everything. We know from that wonderful talk, that 20-minute TED Talk that Jill Bolte Taylor gave on, called My Stroke of Insight, where she had a stroke in her left brain, and she watched as a brain scientist as her left brain went out of commission, and she entered into oneness. She actually became one with the wall in the bathroom. She was so into her oneness. So we know that we have that capacity, and it was euphoric, and it was ecstatic, and she was in that place of ultimate wisdom. She knew everything, and was in touch with everything. So she said she thought that was an important message to share, so that's why she fought so hard to come back to her full capacity, because we are walking around with nirvana in our heads, and we don't even get in touch with it. So this is the benefit of meditation, is it allows us to enter into that place of oneness where we are one with our higher self, where we are walking like a prayer, like Peace Pilgrim. Every moment is a connection with that part of us that is one with everything, that understands all that we need to know in every moment.
What was her name?
Peace Pilgrim.
The stroke of insight.
Oh, Jill Bolte Taylor. Yeah.
What?
Jill Bolte Taylor. A wonderful TED Talk. Absolute must watch. Yeah, she's great. And there was another question over here.
I was wondering about alkaline water.
Yes, great way to go. Wonderful, lovely trick, alkaline water. Yeah. So much of our internal environment is acidic, right? Coffee, chocolate, alcohol, cigarettes, stress, all of those things, disharmony in our relationships, moving, the stressors of life, all of those cause an overacid condition. And when we have an overacid condition, then we create the conditions for disease. In fact, I have a book in my library. It's got a rather dramatic title. It's called Alkalize or Die. But you get the point, right? And so what are alkalizing foods? Well, those are your fresh, raw foods from the garden, right? What are your acidifying foods? Well, that's everything processed in much of the animal industry, right? Those are all acidifying. Another one would be orange juice. So raw, natural orange juice from the tree, very alkalizing. Processed, bought, refrigerated, stored, from concentrate, orange juice, frozen, that's acidifying, right? So alkalizing water, nice shortcut, right? If you're drinking your alkalizing water, you're constantly flooding yourself with that. So now most people would think, well, vinegar, that's acid. Yes, most vinegars are. But the raw apple cider vinegar that Bragg's makes, very alkalizing. In fact, that will actually balance your pH either way. It will help you to find neutral. So a lot of people will just take a little shot of that raw apple cider vinegar and put it in their glass of water and have it first thing in the morning. Just a tablespoon once a day. Wonderful. And then our lovely Einar here, he's doing a wonderful thing with hydrogen peroxide. A couple of drops. It's called the 1 minute cure. Look it up on the web. It's very great. And it's just a lovely little trick for balancing the pH of the body and getting ourselves properly oxygenated. You'll see. Just look it up on the 1 minute cure. It's about hydrogen peroxide. It's a wonderful way. Nice little shortcut. So we do have these shortcuts like alkalizing water that can help. Any other questions for me tonight?
I thought it was going to be in a different direction.
Tonight's talk, yes.
Yeah, and I was thinking of in terms of situations that you're following what's in you, and some people are more aware than others,
Yeah.
or how to listen to when it's telling you that's not the direction to go,
Right.
and knowing the difference.
Yes, exactly. Well, the same principles that we spoke about tonight are going to also work for that sort of situation.
Okay.
So the societal voices, again, those voices of should, those are not the ones that we so much want to listen to. And if you go to that subconscious mind video that I did here in 2015 that Einar recorded for us, you'll see that. About
Can I
how
get
to
it?
Yeah, it's on YouTube. It's this page here that I handed out,
Okay.
there's a link on the bottom for my YouTube channel. It's down there, and the title of the talk is there. So that'll take you right to it. And so that's that one set of voices. That's that sort of should coming from society, right? And then we also have the other set of voices, which is our addictions coming out of our habit mind. Again, the subconscious mind. So getting in touch with our higher self is what we want to do. And that's that voice of neutral compassion, right? So that's also going to direct you and guide you in life. The reason why we focused on the health aspect here is because this is the spirit winds. It's a physical therapy, and so we're enhancing our health here. But these same principles will apply to any direction that you want to do to developing your intuition in life, into walking that prayer, into knowing where you're going. And then, again, like Louise Hay, you're empowering women, and that exercise that we did. What would my 95-year-old self say? So whatever it is that the direction is that's calling you in your life, you know that. Just ask yourself, knowing that you're a part of divinity, how do I get there from here? That same sort of, these exercises will all apply to whatever type of intuition you want to be using, whatever direction you would like your intuition to serve you in. Does that answer your question? Yeah, good. Thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions? We're just about at the end of our time, but there's a little time for one more if you like.
You have another exercise?
No, that's it.
Well,
Yes.
I'd like to know more about what you do in your sessions.
Okay, so I am a medical intuitive, is what has entered the vernacular, is that term, medical intuitive, because of Carolyn Mace, who went on the lecture circuit. And so that's what I call myself officially, but really what I like to call myself is a clairvoyant healer. When I was first doing my work back in the mid-'80s, I really didn't know what to call myself. A psychic for health and healing? I mean, there wasn't a standard. Carolyn hadn't hit the lecture circuit yet. And so I was like, well, it's kind of like what Edgar Casey did, only I'm not asleep, I'm awake. And so I came up with clairvoyant healer as a result. So that's, but on my business card, which you guys all received, is a business card there as well. Looks like this. And so that's, and then I say on there that I'm a medical intuitive. And then I'll just mention, you also received a little flyer for my radio show. I have a weekly radio show. My website is Step Into Magic, and it's a podcast, and you can listen to it on iTunes. And it's all about how to develop your psychic ability, deepen your spirituality, and claim your own true purpose. So that happens every week. It's an hour long, and that will answer some of that question too. But in my process as a medical intuitive or as a clairvoyant healer, what I do is I work exclusively over the telephone. And so people will call me, and they'll say, and oftentimes it's somebody who's like tried everything. I mean, what else are you going to do? Well, you might as well call a psychic, you know. So I'll get calls from all over the world. I've had the good fortune of serving people from every continent in the United States and in the world, including Antarctica. So that was a pretty fun day when Frank came out to the yard. Oh, you've got a call from McMurdo Station? It's like, oh, really? I guess I'll stop watering and come in. You know, the call. So usually what we do is we have an initial little interview where I, just like if you went to any doctor's office, you know, I'll ask a little few questions, personal history, whatever that you might have that you'd like to share, and then a bit about diet, exercise, lifestyle, so I kind of have an idea of who I'm working with. And then I can never prepare for my sessions. I always just have to go in and just start. And what I do is I ground myself and, center myself and call in my guides and, completely go through a whole little meditation before I get on the phone with someone so that I'm fully prepared and sitting ready to receive on their behalf. And then when they call for their appointment, I put my hand on their name and information, their personal information, and then I just receive images or tastes or sensations or words. And I'll go ahead and share with them whatever it is that I have received. And we might discuss that a little bit, and then I'll go back into meditation and receive some more, and we'll discuss that a little bit. And usually we'll get to whatever they called about, although the body does have its priorities, and it will usually go to the most important thing first. And it will just present me with the information. And sometimes the information is a little bit obscure, and I'm thinking, I don't know what a polar bear walking in the snow has to do with anything, but pretty soon we wind up getting there, and the whole story unravels, and we see what that means and why that is of significance to that person for their health and healing. So I'm not a psychic for like relationships or finances. I am a psychic for the body. And my information comes through very clearly in terms of, kidney health or intestinal health or mental health or whatever it might be that the body is calling for and what it needs help with. So that's a little nutshell about what my work is like. Yeah, thank you. Yes?
What's the difference? Okay, my son, when he was young, he was sitting and he asked his friend to move over. You really need to move over. And 2 minutes later, a board fell off.
Whoa, right where his
Okay.
friend was sitting.
And
Beautiful.
so
Connected.
so what kind of intuition is that?
That's a wonderful psychic hit that is what I would call a clairvoyant vision. So there are many types of psychic ability. There's, telekinesis and telepathy, and that is an example of a clairvoyant. I happen to come from a family with a lot of intuitive abilities. My mother was a clairvoyant dreamer, so she saved our lives on a number of occasions through her clairvoyant dreams and also through her clairvoyant knowing, where she would just suddenly know that something was amiss, just like your son knew without a doubt and very clear. And it was probably neutral and compassionate, but it was like, you need to move over.
Yeah.
And so he moved over, wham, down comes the board, right? Same thing with my mom. That kind of energy would just come through. And my older brother developed or inherited the skill of clairvoyance. Now, I do feel that just like music or mathematics will run in a family line, so can psychic ability. But just because I don't have any music or mathematics in my family line does not mean that I can't learn it, right? I learned how to do a little bit of music and a little bit of math. Same thing with everybody with psychic ability. We all can develop our psychic ability. And there are some wonderful, easy tools for it. I consider Self-love as a foundation for developing psychic ability, right? Loving yourself enough to give yourself what you truly love. And then I call the 4 cornerstones of dream interpretation, prayer, meditation, and a sanctuary as the building blocks for developing our psychic ability. And I go into that in some of the other talks that I've given here at Spirit Winds, and I think that we're just about out of time, so I'll just stop there and leave it at that. But that's a great way to get started if you really want to work on developing your psychic ability in that way. Thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you very much for coming. It's been really a pleasure.